Why hello there. I'm Alice. Welcome back to the Nook. Hope you're having a lovely day. So, as some of you may know, I've just recently started my MA course in Visual Communication, Specialism Illustration at the Birmingham City University. And the first half of the course is actually structured around micro-projects, which is like the tutors will teach us something or point us in this particular direction, and then we go off and do a project, researching it, maybe making a thing about it, and each project will last about 1 or 2 weeks depending on us, and we can have as many micro projects as we'd like at the beginning of this year, and hopefully by the midpoint of the course all of those micro projects, all of those knowledge that we've accrued will add up to allow us to form a good opinion on what we want to be doing in the major project for the second half of the course. I think that makes sense. So I'm really excited about these little projects, and I thought they'd be fun to make a video series out of. Think of them as a series of little mini side quests in which through them you will build your experience points so that you can be ready to tackle the boss that is the major project at the end. I came up with this idea because personally, my favorite kind of videos to consume on this platform are video essays. What I do find that is often missing from video essays is the process of how that creator came to acquire this information, because video essays are all about delivering information for you. They're almost educational tools with a side effect of entertainment. They don't really show you how they found that information, and I thought that would be something that would be quite interesting to show. I am just your friendly, knowledge questing person, and you're tagging along with me, okay? Okay, cool. Should be fun, it should be chill, and I'm excited. So, without further ado, let's get started on our first quest for knowledge, shall we? As it is October, our first project assigned is to do with Black History Month, and the theme for this year specifically is Proud to be Black. The task is to do research and make a piece that is to do with the theme. Oh, and apparently this is some kind of competition between us all in the course, because by the end, the tutors will choose a few of our artwork to go into the big screen down at the atrium of the main campus. This is important to keep in mind is all, not so much the competition, but the hypothetical location of where the final piece is going to go. As with most of my projects, I start with a big mind map, just noting down all of my first thoughts where I want to be taking the project. The first thing I thought about was the Black Apparel art project started by Dandy Wellington, of which I got to participate in last year. The whole point of that initiative is about addressing how Black people are pretty much non-existent in fashion plates and advertisements of the early to mid-20th century. This in turn creates a barrier to the vintage clothing community of today, because many people still perceive those styles as quote-unquote white people clothes, making Black people and people of color feel unwelcomed in the community, despite many of the styles having been heavily influenced by Black culture, like the New Orleans jazz scene. The Black Apparel art project calls to artists to make new art that aims to address and undo the effects of this erasure. This initiative, though, mainly focused on vintage fashion, which roughly means the last 100 years. What if we take it even further back? What are some other lingering effects of erasure of Black people from Western history that we can observe now? This reminded me that around that same time, the summer of 2020, when a lot of these discussions were happening, there was a Vogue cover of Simone Biles shot by Annie Leibovitz that was heavily criticized for being terribly lit. I found a really good article by Vox discussing it, in which there was this really great quote by Dana Scruggs. There's a narrative that has been perpetuated throughout the history of photography, or at least within editorial publications, that dark skin is difficult to light. In fashion, you would see a black model, but she would not look her skin tone. Or maybe she was being shot with white people, so they were lighting for white people, not considering that they have a black person. This has created the false idea that black people are hard to light, and there are even black photographers who say the same thing. They have so much internalized racism and anti-blackness that they believe this. When I first read this, I thought that is very true and very interesting, but also here's the thing, it's not just photography. When you ask someone to describe Annie Leibovitz' post-Rolling Stones style, most people would probably say, painterly. Her techniques draw from those of historical paintings, which really did not know what to do when it comes to depicting darker skin. So what can we learn from this? That Western visual language and techniques cannot be taken wholesale to depict black people. It needs to be adapted. So if Annie Leibovitz is an example of someone trying to use Western visual language to depict a black person poorly, is there anyone else who've done it but done it well? Yes, a few in fact. But when I was musing this over while researching, the specific painting that came to mind for me was one of former US President Barack Obama, painted by Kaheen Wiley. Let me just take a moment to read out the artist statement from his website, because it is exactly what I am trying to reach for. By applying the visual language, vocabulary, and conventions of glorification, history, wealth, and prestige to the subject matter drawn from the urban fabric, the subjects and stylistic references for his paintings are juxtaposed in versions of each other, forcing ambiguity and provocative perplexity to pervade his imagery. Okay, but what does that mean? Let me just take a quick detour and do a quick analysis of this painting because I love it so much. Now, looking at this, the first thing you notice is that Obama is seated, calm, serene, and almost engulfed by all of this flora. This was very deliberate. Wiley has stated that when he was coming up this composition with Obama was very conscious about wanting to portray a soft and sensitive image instead of the stereotypical masculine, big man. While a lot of factors come together to create the stereotype of the Black American always existing in grimy urban spaces and always being tough and never soft and sensitive, the effect of it together is stripping away their humanity. And more contemporarily, there's been a lot of discussion about the gentrification of outdoor spaces and racism that exists there. But okay, where in Western art has this specific motif of an overabundance of plant life come from? Because that's what we're focusing on. Well, I am glad you asked, because it is hard to talk about the politics of nature without talking about my boy William Morris and the arts and crafts movement, which Wiley references heavily in most of his work. Morris was a radical socialist who saw the restoration of nature and opposing the oppression of industrialization as things that go hand in hand. Morris, in turn, was very heavily influenced by medieval tapestry, which is a thing that only the richest and most powerful of people could afford, but it often depicts nature, taking something that is supposedly wild and free and accessible to everyone and turning it into a symbol of opulence and luxury. There are just so many layers that you can just keep peeling and peeling and peeling like an onion, or an ogre. Oh, and that goes without saying that the painting is very saturated and vibrant and well lit because Kaheen Wiley is a black man who knows how to light black people. So now I know what kind of approach I want to be taking, using the Western visual language of opulence to celebrate black excellence. What about subject matter? Wiley's subjects are all contemporary people, which of course adds to that anachronistic juxtaposition. I, on the other hand, want to look at historical erasure. Wouldn't it be cool to see a black person from history that has been forgotten now brought back to life, depicted in the art style of their time. I want to make it look natural for an average layman to walk past it and think, that makes sense. It looks like something that has always existed, as it should have always been. In search for my subject, I picked up this book that I've heard about a while back and always meant to read, but I don't like reading nonfiction, so I've always put it off. But now I have an excuse to definitely read it. It's called Black Tudors, The Untold Story by Miranda Kaufman, and it tells 10 stories of people who lived free lives in Tudor England. It's a fascinating book, and my plan is to pick one of the people from this book and make them the subject of my illustration.
Looks out of the house in the yard in the rain.
So, just finished the first crit on the project. It was mixed responses, I would say. I don't know. I think it was just my ego was a tiny bit wounded because I was expecting them to say, "Oh, well done, Alice. This is so much research. You really deep dived into the topic. Good job." But he didn't say that. They went instead, "This is all very well and good. Have you got any sketches of it that we can see?" And I was like, "No, because I've just spent a solid freaking week head deep in research. So, yeah." But that's fine, I get it. They can't critique something that they haven't seen, so I should have brought some sketches. Oh, and also, one of the tutors was like, it seems that a lot of you guys have been focusing on the issues of racism and all that, which is great, but like, I would like to see you do more celebration of like black historical figures that have been historically overlooked instead of focusing on all the problems. And I was like, excuse me, that's what I did. I'm doing that. That's explicitly what my project was about. I made it home. So, I guess I did say at the beginning that one of the reasons why I want to take you along with me on this learning quest is I want to show you the full process. And I guess a part of that is exposing myself as a needy little thin-skinned biatch who gets all up in her feels when someone doesn't give her enough validation. But it's fine. I've had a whinge and a moan. I've had time to reflect. It's now flushed out of my system. Let's use this energy for good. So, plan of action for the next week. I'm gonna finish writing up and documenting all of my research, and that includes finish reading Black Tudors, picking a person from Black Tudors to do my illustration about, show process and iterations, and get on with drawing so that I can actually have something to show. Yeah. Right, I've just had a talk with one of my tutors, and I think together we managed to suss out why I've been feeling a bit miffed since Wednesday. How you arrive at an idea. For me, at least, there are two different ways to do it. One is you get presented with a brief, have 0 ideas, and you kind of just have to do a whole bunch of experiments and stuff and iteration and all that, and then in that process you finally arrive at an idea. A second way you arrive at an idea is you get really lucky and have a eureka moment, in that something in a brief just prompts a really strong image, a really strong idea in your head immediately, and you get latched onto it. Sometimes, because that's your first idea, you get a bit too attached to it, and then you're scared of letting it go because your idea is so brilliant, and then you kind of develop tunnel vision. If this was just purely a self-initiated project, I would have stopped at the idea. I would just, I've done it. I've got it. Eureka! Let's just do it. Bam, bam, boom. Goodbye. But this is what the course is for. Pushing you out of your comfort zone, experimentation, getting you to think more about it. And I need to be more open-minded about it. So these are thumbnails for the idea that I've had stuck in my head since the beginning that I keep going on about. So I've decided to go with Diego, the circumnavigator, Sir Francis Drake's right-hand man. So using the pastiche of Tudor royal portraiture as pioneered by Holbein the Younger and Black Tudor, the composition here has Diego dressed in Elizabethan fashion. This particular getup is as seen in Sir Francis Drake's own portrait. There's a globe behind him to denote his profession as a circumnavigator, as well as the ship, the Golden Hind, leaving the Panama landscape in the background outside this little window. In his hand here, he holds the Drake Jewel, which is a piece of jewelry gifted by Queen Elizabeth I to Sir Francis Drake, with the image of an African man carved in onyx in front of his ivory counterpart, which, now this is up for debate, but it has been interpreted by some as commemorating the role African revolutionaries and former slaves like Diego played in aiding Drake's voyages. He's wearing an earring here as a nod to the surviving images of the Cimarrons that I could find. And yeah, that's the idea. And now I need to just run a few other iterations of this and see where that gets us.
So numerous, his flaws are so few. What's a girl to do? La da da, la da 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 da.
And she's back. That was a long freaking day. So that's a wrap on the second week of this Black History Month project. I've only got 1 week left. If the first week was bruised ego and confusion, then this week was triumphant. I got some very positive feedback as well as some very constructive feedback, and now I have a clear vision of what I want to do. This third week is gonna be solid drawing. I know exactly what I'm doing. So hold it right there. Editing Alice here. As you may have noticed, the first week of this project was super well organized and methodical research, and then it just descended into absolute chaos. What you need to know here is I had some tutorials with some tutors and made some solid decisions on how to execute the final piece. I will come back to elaborate on how all that happened later, but for now, just roll with it. I've got 6 days to pull this off. I can do it. It's doable. It's doable. It's fine. It's doable. I just need to not do anything else. So I emailed the course leader to ask for the accurate dimensions of the screen downstairs where the work is supposed to go if we are chosen, thinking that, you know, either he will have the accurate numbers because he keeps banging on about it, or at least he'll know some tech people that he can point me to ask that information. But no, instead he sent me an email that says, "Hi Alice, I've had a look downstairs and it's approximately 3 meters by 5 meters. And sent me a picture of it." Like, yes Rob, I know, I walk past it every week. But it is nice to have this picture though, because what I actually need is just the ratio of how long it is versus how high it is. So what I'm gonna do is take this photo, stretch it, and adjust it so that all the lines are straight, so we have a solid square angled rectangle, and then we can just take some measurements of that and use that ratio to make the final piece out of. So here is the official final design, ready to be sketched up, to be inked up.
Your waistcoat holds a pocket watch, I's to dot and some T's to cross. You're doing all your very best so you can ensure success.
Sketch done. Does it look like I've spent a whole freaking day on it? Because I've spent a whole freaking day on it.
I think success, it's not so tough. Go the same direction for long enough. And yes, sometimes it might feel slow, but you'll get where you want to go. But first I think you should know.
I don't normally take this long to sketch, but this piece has just got a whole lot of detail, a whole lot of precise detail that I gotta measure out and make sure that everything fits properly and is symmetrical and all that. So I can't just do my usual trick of wing it when we're inking. Everything needs to be in its right place. That is why it took 10 hours. The next part is the fun part because no more brain is required. I've done all the brain work. Now I can just zone out and get into the inking. Everyone thinks inking is the hardest part because I guess inking can feel intimidating to a lot of people because it's permanent, you can't go back, and this is the final step and all that. But inking's the most relaxing bit because everything is there. You just need to ink it. You don't have to use this anymore. This is the most time-consuming bit. So the hard work should theoretically be done. I have 2 more days.
We're all mad here, insane from time to play and good conversation. It's not bad here, you'd be surprised to find what turns out to be salvation. Don't be sad, dear, where I've missed milestones. It's okay, there's something else there. I'm quite mad, dear, I think you must be too, or you would be elsewhere.
This is probably a good place to catch you up on everything. Where I left you off at the end of the first week of solid research is that I've come to the conclusion that I want to pick a person from the Black Tudors book and illustrate them in a celebratory manner using a pastiche, as my tutors who are no doubt watching would insist I say, or in layman's terms, an art style of the era, in this case, Tudor court portraiture. So the main message and information that the book Black Tudors set out to spread is that not only did black people exist in Tudor England, pretty much all of them were free. The fancy, slightly propaganda-y explanation as to why this could be can be summed up in a famous quote by James Mansfield, an English lawyer in the early 1800s. "The air of England has long been too pure for a slave, and every man is free who breathes it. Do not rate my accent." That's jolly lovely. The probably more realistic answer is if anyone knows anything about the Tudors, you'd know that England at the time was way too busy sinking money into getting the monarch's divorces and squabbling with the French and Spanish to have any colonies that would facilitate a slave trade. There were a couple of English slavers here and there, but the market for it didn't explode until later when the whole British Empire thing came around. The book details the lives of 10 black people who lived in England during this Tudor era. Some were skilled laborers, some climbed the ranks as court musicians, while others, like the person I've chosen for this project, Diego, chose a life of swashbuckling adventure as a crew member of Sir Francis Drake's famous voyages, playing a key role in fostering alliances between the English and the maroon communities of former slaves in Panama. He was a former Spanish slave himself who saved the crew of the Golden Hinds behind on several occasions and quickly became Drake's personal manservant, a role of notable status since he would be one of the very few people with personal access to the captain himself, and at sea, the captain is king. He even came with Drake to live in England for 4 years before accompanying him once again on his final voyage. I was already a Tudor nerd before this, but reading Diego's story, I was absolutely riveted. It was full of adventure and drama worthy of a Hollywood blockbuster. Think of the way our current British and, I don't know, maybe even American pop culture treat this era like a bottomless cash cow. We can't get enough of the Tudors. And I bloody love her, but how many takes on the story of Anne Boleyn do we need? I think Diego's story, as well as those of his fellow Black Tudors, deserve the same fanfare and romanticism as that we bestow on their white contemporaries. And this makes him a perfect candidate for this project. This took me to the first sketch that I talked you through earlier. The idea here is to imagine Diego as painted by Holbein the Younger, who was the court painter for Henry VIII. Yes, the House of Holbein for you musical theater nerds and TikTok kids out there. I really like Holbein in that he was one of the first portrait artists to think about incorporating props into the setting to tell the story of his sitter, something that nowadays we would call semiotics, the art of storytelling through symbolism. Before him, you, for the most part, only have a person's clothing to go on. This is great for my purposes because, of course, I don't know what Diego looked like. I cannot travel back in time to capture his likeness, so I have to rely on everything around me to help convey who he was, the more the merrier. This was the idea that I got so hung up on for the whole project, and retrospectively, I am glad that I got pushed out of it because the trouble with Holbein and court portraiture of this time is that they are compositionally very static. You can dress the set all you like, but at the end of the day, there's only so much you can get out of a dude just sitting there. When I had those tutorials in the second week, I had them right after making a presentation about the drama of Artemisia Gentileschi, and I apparently got very passionate about it. So when you smash cut to this composition, it did seem to Matt, one of the tutors, like the energy level just took a nosedive down the boring cliff. So, in search of drama, I looked further down in the timeline and found Jacob Houbraken, who was an engraver in Holland in the 18th century. And his whole thing was he would take an old court painting, like a Holbein, and treat it like it's a physical object and place it into a trompe-l'oeil tableau. Instead of being inside the painting with the sitter, the props are now outside of the frame, surrounding it in an elaborate display. And I thought, yes, look at these things. They look mad. So much is going on, and it's so ridiculous and grandiose, and I love it. As I said before, we now think back to the Tudors as an era of over-the-top melodrama. The theme of this project is proud to be black. The MO is to use the language of glorification to celebrate an underappreciated black story. Why not just go for it? In for a penny, in for a pound. And that was how the second composition came about. After this thumbnail, I did wonder if it's a bit too much and I should try dialing things down a little. I looked at another engraver of the same era, Van de Werf, who liked to do engravings of the old paintings as well, but taking it a step further in the trompe-l'oeil motif and turning them into busts. Now, if you've seen my Mary Wollstonecraft video, you know I have a thing for statues. But I couldn't quite decide if the connection between this project and statues and BLM protests is one that is interesting and provocative, or just a bit ill thought through. I would need to run that around my noggin a little more. Furthermore, both Matt and Becky, the two tutors I talked to, agreed that this third composition is a bit too minimalistic. I went too far the other way. I would end up losing all those cool storytelling props. And then there'd be no semiotics, and we like semiotics. So 2 it is, but we couldn't stop there. Becky pointed out that semiotics is all well and good, but it only works if the audience already have an understanding of what's going on. In this case, the story of Diego is too obscure for a normal person to just look at and instantly get it. More text is needed on the image to provide the audience with better context, like the little tags in museums. We were throwing ideas around on how I can provide this function to the image without compromising too much on the form of the composition, which, as you can see, is pretty packed already. Then a light bulb moment. The screen where this is supposed to go is landscape. There's no reason why this piece needs to stay in a portrait orientation, and since we're already doing trompe-l'oeil, I can just extend the fake wall at the back, steal the banner from the third composition, et voila! So, you know how spending 3 solid days doing a meticulous drawing can make a person go a little potty, and by the time it's finished, their brain is so fried that they decide a dance in the kitchen to dramatic Russian music is the only appropriate way to decompress.
Утешительно мне судьба моя, все, что лучшего в жизни Бог мне дал, отдал жертву я огневым глазам.
So, I guess this is wrap-up time. I must say, I am rather pleased with how everything turned out. As annoyed as I was in the moment, I'm very glad ultimately that the tutors pushed me to go out of my comfort zone and do more iterations and explore the concept more deeply, because this is definitely so much better than the original Holbein-esque idea that I had. I hope you enjoyed the video. I had an absolute mare editing it because, as you might have noticed, at some point things just went all over the bloody place. But I did promise you the full creative process, warts and all. So, you know, if you like what you see, comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!